These elements to join us for this official opening of Mersey Sounds. Mersey Sounds is a collaboration between Writing on the Wall and local architect Daniel Smith, who's over there from Smith Young. It's part of Liverpool's A Very Public Art, a commission by Culture Liverpool, which is designed really to, after COVID, to open things up a bit, get people off the couch, out of the living room and talking about art. And certainly over the weekend there's been a lot of talk about this very beautiful installation. Writing on the Wall first collaborated with Daniel Smith in 2018 when we built a wall of freedom in Church Street to trump Donald Trump. So we were aware of Daniel's ambition to reimagine Arthur Dooley's Speakers platform, and many of you will know, I know there's a lot of Dooley fans here today, that the platform was first erected in 1973. It was funded by the trade unions and it was opened by Jack Jones. Arthur was a committed communist and a fabulous sculptor and artist. And Daniel Smith's dad was one of the fabricators on this project, on the original project. So it's been a real special thing for him to see this erected on the pier head. And the modern installation talks about Liverpool as being a democratic city. Liverpool is a city with something to say, and I think that in the context of politically what's going on at the moment, you know, it's talking about the right to protest, the right to demonstrate, and it also reflects the diversity of the city's heritage and of the city's experience. And I'll hand over to Mike now to say a bit more about that.
Okay, people are complaining about the weather, but I have to say, having been on demonstrations down here over the years, when the original one was here as well, this is more than appropriate. And I think you earn your spares, and you can all give yourselves a big pat on the back for being here in this weather. It is August after all, so what else should we expect in this country? Madeline mentioned about this being about having a voice, and you can see obviously the megaphone represents that. And what we have created is a soundscape that is on a 1 hour loop that will be running here throughout the time that Mersey Sounds is here, which has a collection of voices from history and more current voices as well. We've had recordings from the records office, from the archives, which feature the voice of Arthur Dooley, and we've had modern readings and modern experiences as well. I want to say a particular thanks for the soundscape to a couple of people who helped create it. Janaea Pickett, where are you? There she is, Janaea Pickett. Andy the sound designer, Simon Banks the sound engineer, and the contractors who made Mersey Sounds possible. And the voices that you will hear on this, and we're going to start this in a few moments, represent a vast range of experiences. So we have the LGBT community, recordings from the 60s talking about the difficulties that they encountered. We have Amina Atik, Yemeni community with her poem I Speak Scouse. We have people talking about dock lives and oral histories. We have people, recordings from Irish travellers, a young woman, a daughter interviewing her father about their experiences. We have the black community talking about their experiences, like Ray Wallace. We have Brian Biggs over here, from one of the books that the Blue Coat produced, talking about the radical history of Liverpool as well. We have Sean Garrett reading from his grandfather, George Garrett, about the experience on the docks as well. So we've tried to capture as much as we possibly can. We have Lexi over there, young voice from Liverpool, talking about children and play, which is very relevant to this area and other areas as well. We have people talking about the Prince's Park Health Centre, a book that we've just produced. So it's not just about the docks, it's about Liverpool as a whole, and most importantly about having a voice. I remember myself when I first got involved when I was like 17 or 18 in the Labour Party, the Young Socialist and radical politics in Liverpool. There were places everywhere, from Labour clubs to community centres to demonstrations, you name it, where you could speak and you could talk and you could share experiences. And I feel that certainly in a live sense, those spaces are disappearing. A lot of stuff is online, as we know, but those spaces are disappearing. And this represents the idea of a voice and the fact that in Liverpool we have a voice, and we want people to be able to have a voice in the shaping of our own destinies as well as the city itself. So in the true spirit of this, would anybody like to say anything? Now that we've said that you all have a voice, are you all going to go quiet? And if you are going to say anything, you know, not an hour-long speech, because that's the other thing about the Labour movement, we do tend to speak for a long time. Anybody like to say anything at all? Donna, I like it. One volunteer.
Come on, Don.
Come on, Donna.
And it's Donna's birthday today. Happy birthday.
What a present!
Happy birthday, Donna. Happy birthday to you. Go on, say your piece.
I just want to say that obviously Daniel is my brother, and I'm like really proud of him and Madeline as well for making this dream a reality, and the dedication to my dad as well. So that was all I had to say really, like just well done, and I'm just really proud of Daniel.
Thanks, Donna. Anyone else got a few words? Pat, come on, Pat.
Well, it's not my birthday, so don't sing. But it's just, this is amazing today, because we were just talking and explaining to people before how we used to come down here many, many years ago when the seas and the boats had come in. And this area here would be Speakers Corner, if you like. And people, trade unions and labour movement and different groups would all get together. And it was where we used to get around people and talk to people, and everyone had points of view, and it was like the old soapbox in the park where you all had a good chin wag. And as we say, the dockers had come off the boats and the seafarers, and it was a great place to be. So let's hope we keep this here for a long, long time. Let's organise to make sure we've got something where we can all feel part of and get together on a regular basis. And well done to Plan and everyone for what they've done.
Thank you, Pat. From such a stalwart activist, that means a lot. Thanks a lot. Any final words? Tony, come on. Come on, Tony.
I'll pass you a note in 30 minutes.
Stay awake, everyone. I'd just like to say how proud Arthur Dooley would be that many, many years after it mysteriously went missing, this platform that's here erected back in 73, 48 years ago, is still going to be sort of resonant for people to walk by and people to think what a great artist that man was. And in some ways he sums up the contradictions that are Liverpool. Brought a fervent supporter of the Orange Lodge in the Dingle, went to the army and became a boxing champion, became a committed communist, became a committed anti-fascist, whilst all the time maintaining his artistic endeavour. So I would just like to say this is a great tribute to him and to Writing on the Wall for bringing it back 48 years later, and to Daniel. Thanks very much.
Come on, Dad, sorry. Look at the
say thank you very much for coming today. I want to say a big thank you to Madeline and Mike for grinding walls and Catherine Sue, they've been amazing at the weekend. She was fantastic. MSR, who the steel fabricator to this, he moved us here, constructed there, we couldn't have done without him. But it's been a project that we've been trying to complete for at least 18 years, trying to do this. So it's quite an emotional thing for me on many different levels. But I just want to big thank you to these two for supporting me to be able to do this. And it's been emotional.
Let's just say, I think Daniel has absolutely done his father proud in doing this. So we'd like to present just a little bottle to Dan.
Thank you. Anybody want a Bailey's?
Open it now, open it now.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to reiterate Dan's thanks to the Culture Liverpool team, Eliza and Sue and Katie, who've been brilliant, not just in terms of supporting this financially, but physically being here and helping us get the whole thing together. So thank you to those.
Okay, so we're now going to switch on the soundscape. As I say, it's on a 1 hour loop. It'll be on here for as long as the installation is up. So you can listen to some of this now. Obviously you can come back down. We'd encourage you to, tell your friends, your family and everybody else to come on down and listen to it, reflect upon the voices that we're going to hear and what this means and what it meant from Arthur Dooley, as Tony said, through to the modern day in terms of a democratic spirit of Liverpool and this representation of that through the original work of Arthur Dooley. Thanks very much.
I'm Daniel Smith, an architect for the new Speakers platform. As a child with my father and sister, every other Sunday we used to go to the pier head, and I remember vividly this huge red structure that stood out against the greyness of the surround. We used to play, climb, run up and down and shout from the top, and I absolutely loved it. When I was older, it was only then I understood what it actually stood for. In 1973, the Liverpool Trades Council celebrated its 125th anniversary. In order to mark the occasion, Arthur Dooley was invited to submit ideas for the work.
Various black steamers, so unlike the American boats, since they have to navigate the boisterous narrow seas, plying to all parts of the Three Kingdoms. Here you see vast quantities of produce imported from starving Ireland. Here you see the decks turned into pens for oxen and sheep. And often side by side with these enclosures, Irish deck passengers, thick as they can stand, seemingly pending.
A port trading relationship based on fine goods, silk, cotton, tea. Thanks to the gracious ocean, we established our families and communities here in Liverpool. We have on occasion endured racism and even racist policies designed to eradicate what we have built and nurtured. However, we won't be daunted or become...
I'm Daniel Smith, an architect for the new Speakers platform. As a child with my father and sister, every other Sunday we used to go to the pier head, and I remember vividly this huge red structure that stood out against the greyness of the surround. We used to play, climb, run up and down and shout from its top, and I absolutely loved it. When I was older, it was only then I understood what it actually stood for. In 1973, the Liverpool Trades Council celebrated its 125th anniversary. In order to mark the occasion, Arthur Dooley was invited to submit ideas for the work. He rejected the idea of a traditional sculpture, proposing that a speaker's platform be provided instead. In the early 1990s, Dooley's iron podium was quietly removed when the pier head was redesigned, and Liverpool fell silent. For a number of years, I tried to seek the platform with an idea to re-erect it. I always felt that without this platform, Liverpool had lost its voice. It was only later I found out that my father, who actually has passed, actually fabricated the original structure, so it took on another meaning for me. The proposal is to erect a new speakers platform that symbolises an important era in the city's recent past, but also for the future, a platform to speak, to debate and exchange new ideas and recite stories of old and new. But this is for you, Dad.
My name's Arthur Dooley, and I earn my living as a sculptor. I do all my work here in Liverpool, where I was born. I believe that living in a place where you earn your bread means something.
Everything that happens to it is a part of you. Everything that you do becomes a part of it. A lot has happened to Liverpool since the last war. Big business and the politicians have been having a ball. And when they've finished bankrupting this city, the people must organise and come into their own.
Brunswick Dock to the west of Princes is one of the most interesting to be seen. Here lies the various black steamers, so unlike the American boats since they have to navigate the boisterous narrow seas, plying to all parts of the three kingdoms. Here you see vast quantities of produce imported from starving Ireland. Here you see the decks turned into pens for oxen and sheep, and often side by side with these enclosures, Irish deck passengers, thick as they can stand, seemingly penned in just like the cattle. It was the beginning of July when the Highlander arrived in port, and the Irish labourers were daily coming over by thousands to help harvest the English crops.
My name is Frank Henry. I'm a local artist, and I knew Arthur from 1962 onwards, when I was introduced to him at the Blue Angel with Alan Williams, who was the manager of the Beatles. The first thing about Arthur was that he was an Irish guard. After the war, he in fact took the side of the Palestinians in the Middle East. In fact, he was leading a group of Palestinians to steal armoured cars or whatever and trucks from his own people, you see. You would have thought it was one but an execution afterwards.
Aty ku jeta të përballë me pasqyrën tënde, e shkatruar me flokë të prishura si kur era të kish lozur me ato në mënyrë të pafajshme. Me sy të fryrë e të skuqur si kur të kishe qenë pjesë e një përleshje në rrugët e qytetit. Aty ku jeta të thot stop. Stop përpara vetes dhe shiko sa e dopt je. Mbledh forca pikërisht nga ty, nga ky stop.
My granddad promised to bring the sunshine to your streets, birth 4 generations of Yemeni daughters and sons in city crowds and drowning the noise into lonely nights. You stood at your gate with your human chain, chanting you'll never walk alone. A promise in exchange to keep them wrapped in your summer days and winter nights, to raise them in their youthful years, running across Matthew Street, imagining all the people sharing our world, sweeping away the hate, to never shy away from your scoutness, your charisma and your charm, to lift your head in the presence of those who don't know you. Because, sir, I speak Scouse.
华人社区，它是澳洲最古老的华人社区。早在1800年代中期 ，It is the oldest Chinese community in Europe, an historical connection that established itself in the mid-1800s, with the Blue Funnel shipping line, a port trading relationship based on fine goods, silk, cotton, tea. Thanks to the gracious ocean, we established our families and communities here in Liverpool. We have on occasion endured racialism and even racist policies designed to eradicate what we have built and nurtured. However, we won't be daunted or become dispirited and will continue to honour our Chinese roots and links, whilst continuing to play a full part within the wider community Liverpool.
In many ways, it is the story of the sea. It was the sea that brought people to Liverpool and the sea that was to transport them to other worlds. For those that stayed from the colonies, dominions, from imperial ports and poverty-racked villages within the British Empire, new relationships and communities were forged. In 1911, over 177,000 seafarers sailed from Liverpool, including those from Africa, the Caribbean, China, Scandinavia, India, Russia and the United States.
My father was John Isaac Corliss, a Barbadian sailor, born in 1872. He married my mother, Elizabeth Lawrence, in the 1800s. Now, I remember when he came home from sea, they used to have this thing by the pier head where the Mersey Dock and Harbour Board offices are. It was a big slate, and the ships coming into dock would have their names put on that slate. My mum used to send me down to have a look at it. The time of the tide, it said, what time they were coming in, and what dock the ship was going to. We'd go down to the slate when it was expected home to see what time the ship was going to be in. Then you could gauge what time it was likely to be home.
This 1914, that's 1910, I left my father, my mother, 1911, come Freetown, seaport. They brought me England with the ship. I've been many ships, so the first ship I come with in Great Britain, Sabine, Union Castle Line. Sabine, Union Castle Line. The first place we left, Hull, 1914. Hull. So the place I was there. In Hull again, they robbed me out of it. Because that job I come with it, is a pantry boy. After all, I changed my job, second cook, galley boy. After I get good job, I be cook. But those favorite days, I have a rough time. Before Great Britain here, condition was all over England. It was poverty-rich land, poverty country. I won't tell nobody lie. Hardship, hard life, hard to get job. 1914. Another thing, those days they don't want to see color, black man. Oh, the prejudice too much. But thank God, all we pass through, all we goes through. There's one thing I trust God every day is my life. Why? The Spirit of God is with me. That's the main thing I say every day. Think hard, I go there, I pass by.
My name is Annie Kamara. I'm from Congo, but my dad is from Senegal, my mom is from Congo. I come here 6 years in Liverpool, but I'm in the UK 16 years. It's long story. I don't involve it. Easy story, but it's long story.
I think that mankind's greatest achievements are in his cities, and that among cities, seaports are the jewels.
The social ideas come in from all over the world and settle in there. This is what strikes me about Liverpool. It's Leningrad, it's San Francisco, it's a Hamburg, and it's Marseille, all rolled into one. We have all these different races coming into Liverpool. Irish, Jews, West African and West Indian. They come in and settle and bring new blood and new ideas. This is what makes great seaports. Probably some of the most highly civilised places to live in the world.
First of all, I came here just to visit. I was living in London, and things was not working properly. I said, let me move in another town. And then I came here, and friend for my friend, I see people who are just kind and I find the place to go. I find people who's welcoming me. And I think it's a small town. You can jump there from there. Or live in London is very far to go another place, 1 hour, 2 hours. I said, let me check, maybe one day I'll come back and live here.
I believe that hope lies with men like these, the workers of Merseyside. These are the artists of the nation. They create the wealth.
These are the men that make the dilettantes and art students look like amateurs. Take any one ship. It's worth infinitely more than anything that's being done in all the art schools and galleries put together. These men handle hundreds of tons of iron and steel and turn it into something that works. These are the people who are benefiting society. These men are not playing at life. I put my faith in them.
I am also the first woman in 800 years history to ever work as crew on the Mersey ferry, which I did last year. But yeah, on my mum's side of the family are Irish Catholics. My granddad was a docker, my uncles were. My dad is Scottish and he came to work in Fords in the 60s, I think, and he went on to be branch secretary of his union. Like I say, my earliest memories of the pier head was of Arthur Dooley's structure. There's pictures of me climbing it. That's where we used to go. I used to sit on his shoulders going on marches. But also got to give credit to my mum as well, because if anything, I've taken after her a lot more because she was an incessant letter writer. And one of the two things I'm proudest of her most is she wrote letters against Billy Graham coming to Liverpool, the evangelicist, and she also wrote a letter that was like put on the headline saying, after Hillsborough, saying she'd never ever buy a Murdoch paper again, and that got published with the headline. So I'm following in her tradition. It's terrible, isn't it, when you realise that you're turning into your mother?
I was born in Liverpool, right in the heart of Liverpool, in Bolton Street, which is just beyond Lime Street, opposite Lime Street Station, 1912. And my father was he was a foreman on the docks, porter, and in Lamport and Holt's, he was the foreman. His father before him was the foreman. The uncles were foremen. They were all foremen because they stayed in them days. You stayed in one firm. There was no trotting around from one place to the other. Not until later in life when things got disorganised instead of being organised.
So you had a family tradition?
Family tradition, yes.
Did your mother go out to work?
No, she had 11 children.
I headed straight for factories, to learn a trade. And that's what I did. I was an apprentice. I used to do messages, pick up things, go around the workroom. They used to send me out to different companies carrying dresses on my arm. As you imagine, I was not quite 14 and carried loaded dresses places from here to CNA and from there to there. A little runabout job all day long. And then I used to do the messages for the others, go and get their lunch and wherever they wanted. And they'd all give me money as well, so I earned money. When we got home, the money was put in the centre of the table, all money earned. The others' wages, everybody's wages were pooled. As he said, there's 4 younger than you. The money you earn is to help to keep the others.
Tell us about looking for work with your daddy.
Just memories I can go. I can remember from an early age would be I say around about maybe 9 or 10, even earlier than that. My daddy would be going out looking for work, and obviously you'd have to go, and the other boys would all have to go out with him, and trying to help him, whatever he was doing, whether he was buying or selling furniture, or he was going out hawking looking for different jobs. Whatever was around that time, you'd have to try and do it. Even it could be gathering scrap, selling carpets, selling lino, just going out door-to-door salesman, and they were easy enough. They weren't too easy, but they weren't hard times. It was nice for when you look back on it now. and you're going out and you're doing that with your own father. But not only that, it was you were meeting all the other people that you used to meet, and that you'd end up talking to, and it was nice, and it was different times as well.
My granddad was always outspoken. His dock nickname apparently was Fair Shares, because if another docker had lost the wages for whatever reason, he'd go around pestering everyone to put the fair share in so they could put a collection in for him. You just brought up that way. You brought up that way, and I've been accused of having a chip on my shoulder, but I can't imagine being any other way. I was born with it if I have got a chip on my shoulder. As you find changing jobs, though, you realise that unions aren't always there. Mum and dad both had just a small number of jobs their entire life in big workplaces where there was a strong union. I've had probably over 50 jobs in my life, and so obviously the union structure hasn't always been there. And I'd like to say that meant I just kept my head down and kept out of trouble, but I didn't. And I've always been a complainer, and I've always been a letter writer.
A stowaway has to begin somewhere, and the best place is at the docks. Mine was the Liverpool docks. Liverpool in 1913 with its 7-mile dock road running parallel to the River Mersey and its elevated street railway overlooking both. The road itself, straight but not very wide, which flanked the line of docks at the time stretching from the Herculaneum to the Hornby, was, except on Sundays, daily congested by 2 long streams of horse-drawn traffic. Dock after dock and rushing bare-armed about the sheds and quays. Swarms of go-ahead truckmen entirely dependent on the ships. Everywhere ships, more steam than sail, charging the air with smoke and noise. Coal barges, trawlers, small coasters, ocean liners and cargo boats. Tramps of all nationalities, represented by the flags that flew at every stern, but all outnumbered by the red ensign, which floating with more of the flagstaffs indicated Britain's far-flung trade.
Nalinga, nalingiyo, nga monzemba célibataire. Nazali mwasi nalinga ngai, bachi kabisa amour sans frontières.
Is it where we get our head down at night? Where we picture ourselves when our chests go tight? Where we go when comments people say don't really sit right? Where we rest when we are too tired to fight? Is it somewhere we can reach by phone? Is it somewhere we can ever be alone? Where do you go when I say home?
On a Sunday evening in the winter, November '44, I went down on a Sunday night, and there was a cinema, an old cinema opposite Owen Owens where the Metro is now, set back. And I was in the queue there, and I saw this chappie in American uniform, because there were lots of Americans were here then, you see. And I liked the look of it. Anyhow, our time came to go in, and I watched where he sat, and I sat about a few rows behind. So for that 2.5 hours, I was watching like a hawk. And then I was thinking now, when he walked up the aisle coming out, I moved just out of my row of seat, and then we met. And you know, I was thinking of it, within 5 yards of walking out of that building, we were holding hands.
The Aintree Bar, and then there was the Magic Clock, which was excellent. Then the Royal Court Bar, which was good. Where the Playhouse Coffee Lounge is now, that round thing, that's where the old Royal was. That's where I met Eric, that's where I worked. That's how I met Eric.
Pubs in those days closed actually at 10 o'clock, hard to believe these days. And no sort of beer or alcohol was available after 10 o'clock. And quite often we'd go to our
different people's flats for the rest of the evening. Plus we had 2 coffee bars in Bowl Street. One was the Alcabala, and the other one was the Labusola, and we used to go there, didn't we, Brian?
Yeah,
so that was very good.
Prior to going to the
Adelphi,
we used to go to the Adelphi. What it was, the pot of coffee cost £0.50 a crown. You could get 3 cups out of it. So we used to sit on these settees and chairs, you know, nearly sit on the floor because the springs were going, because it was only British Rail in those days.
I know of very few women of my age, or maybe just a bit younger than me, who actually ever came out to their parents. The parents knew and accepted it, but it was never actually discussed. And I suppose most people wouldn't have thought it was necessary. My ex-husband, I don't know what he thought, but I mean, for the last 30 odd years, he's been a close friend and visited us regularly and totally accepted me, you know, as my partner. I don't know, it was never spelled out, ever. What you don't know, you don't worry about is the sort of the idea, isn't it? So you just accept that somebody's there. But my ex-mother-in-law also, because I looked after her for a long time until she died, it was just accepted that that was Julie and I together.
I mean, I went to see my own GP years ago when I was worried about it. I thought, you know, can it be cured or can't it or whatever? And I don't think my GP knew either, so he signed me up to quite a long lot of sessions with a psychiatrist at Walton Hospital. And I was seeing this man about every 2 weeks for quite a long time. He was making copious notes about history and all that, and he was asking all sorts of questions, and in the end it didn't do me any good, and I got fed up with going, so I stopped going eventually. And then I think it was like a bit of a nervous breakdown I had a couple of years after that, and I went to see my doctor again, and the GP put me in touch with a different psychiatrist at Walton Hospital, and I found it much easier to talk to this man. And I think people generally got a bit more liberal about the gay issue, and he certainly was. He said, well, don't let it worry you. He said, why don't you join gay associations? You know, there are plenty of them around now. He said, why don't you join them and get to know people who are like you rather than fighting it, you know. Really, that lifted a whole load of conscience for me, you know. It lifted a whole load of worry, you know. It gave me permission. That's exactly what I did. I took permission, and from then on, I didn't look back.
When I got back to Liverpool and saw the state it was in and the way things were developing, I was seeing my own culture being attacked, and I decided to do something about it. To watch something being destroyed, that hurt me. I knew I had to make some contribution, make some kind of stand. I had to make a platform. Arthur was the first artist to do a work of art after Hillsborough, and he unveiled in the Kirby Suite in 1990, he unveiled his golden Christ with a red sacred heart as a public memorial to the people who lost their lives. And he also made 95 brass candlesticks that he gave out to each of the families, because at the time it was only the 95. We hadn't lost yet Tony Bland. And I find it very telling. So we got the maquette of that piece in the Florrie, if you want to go and see it. The original bronze is in the Kirby Suite, the one-stop shop in Kirby Town Centre. But I find that very telling that Arthur died in 1994, but the last great work of art he did was to commemorate and provide solace to his people over Hillsborough.
I love Liverpool, my city. Liverpool is like a big flower with infinite petals and all the colours. John Lennon said, "Love is a flower, you've got to let it grow. We grow better when we help and support each other to nurture our potential."
In those days in Great Ormond Street, you had cattle going to the abattoir. I used to love crossing there. And my mother would say, "Don't cross the street, you know, where the cattle are," because we used to try and get in between them. And you'd hear them all baying, you know, and mooing, because you could smell the blood from the abattoir.
You know, it was good carts, horses and carts. It was much more exciting for a kid, if you know, in them days, in the markets. We used to go to the markets and get American comics in those days. It was rather fun, if you know, for us as kids.
I first started school at 5 years of age when the war was on, the Second World War, and I went to Netherfield Road Council School.
Yes. That's in Everton?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's, you know Everton's badge on their jersey?
Yeah.
Well, it's that's Prince Rupert's, whatever it is that's on Everton's jersey. And the school I went to was right facing the park. It's still there in Netherfield Road.
Yes.
And then from there I moved to a church school when the war started properly, because they made our school a hospital for soldiers that were getting injured in the war.
Yeah.
And they had red uniforms and blue uniforms, the soldiers that got hurt. And I had to go to St Augustine's Church of England Church School,
Yeah.
which was called Salisbury Street.
Yeah.
From there, when you were a certain age, you had to leave, and I went to Hayward Street School, where I was born and reared in Hayward Street.
Yeah.
And then when I was 11, I had to go to Venice Street.
Yeah.
Well, I spent all my happy years in Venice Street.
Yes.
As a lad.
What do you mean you spent all your happy years?
Well, everything seemed to happen. I was getting bigger, I was getting heavier.
Yeah.
I was playing football, I was running, I was in the boys' brigade, I went to the Everton Red Triangle.
Yes.
I done jiu-jitsu in a cellar.
Yeah.
I enjoyed all that as I got older.
What do you like about going on travel? Meeting new people, or meeting people that we haven't seen for ages. When we go back into the house for the winter months, and then come back out and then meeting other people.
Are you looking forward for Appleby?
Yeah, definitely. I can't wait for Appleby.
So am I. And why?
Well, because we're going to be playing at Appleby, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going to be playing in the same as we did last year, and then walk around, buy a few things, meet a few people, and have a good time.
Same here.
I was invited to the birthday party. I checked my pocket. It was empty. I asked myself, what I'm going to do? Question mark. I turned around, no answer. Going to the birthday party without a gift? I can walk, but it's far. This is not a problem. Yes, I can walk. But what about the gift? I will go. Yes, I will go. Everyone came with the gift except me. Few seconds before each one give his gift, I asked permission for saying something. And I told them a funny story with dancing. Everyone was very happy, laughing and smiling. And then I said after, I'm very, very sorry. I've got no gift. This is the only gift I've got. I have the gift of love and peace. Making people laugh, smile, and be happy. The only gift I'm bringing everywhere I'm going.
The movement of the boxer, the singer, the guitar player, the DJ, the dancer, the itinerant rigger or cafe bar worker continues to loom alongside a culture that was born out of the thousands that worked the ships and the millions who emigrated in them.
So I think it's because of the historical links that we have, Black Liverpool has, with Burton Wood, for example, during World War II, and also with the whole issue of black merchant seamen. You know, whether you've come from West Africa, you've settled in Liverpool, you're still a seaman, and you're going to America. You've got children in Liverpool. You're bringing all the music over. It's that sort of thing. That's what was happening, and it's those sorts of cultural links as well with Black America.
Art hasn't come into its own yet, but it will when the great masses, through education,
through new ways of learning, through new systems of thinking. When they latch onto it and become enthused and learn to touch things and see things for themselves, you know it means new ways of teaching. It'll mean a whole new dimension in education. But it'll be for the masses. It's no longer for the odd individual, the odd-kept man, the odd big name. It's gonna be for all. Lord Woodbine came over on the Empire Windrush in 1948, and he introduced steel pan to Britain, by the way. He had the first steel pan orchestra that toured the UK. Harold Phillips is like a really underrated cultural figure in this country. And in fact, we've got an idea, me and Andy wanted to rectify this anomaly that nobody really knows about the black influence on the Beatles, but in the early days of the band, I'm led to believe that the Beatles, or certainly Lennon and McCartney, were known locally as Woodbine's boys, because Harold would take them round the black shebeens and the black clubs of Liverpool 8, yeah, which the black musicians didn't like, because he said these white boys are going to nick our music, and guess what? They did. Now, Carol said that the reason that she thought the Beatles rose above everybody else in the stable was because their X factor was that her dad taught them the chromatic scale on the steel pan. Now, I don't know if that's true, but certainly the only Beatles song or Beatles-related song I know that uses the steel pan is Beautiful Boy by John Lennon, that he wrote for his son Sean, and such a beautiful song from the heart for his own child.
She spoke of how on summer evenings the air would be filled with a cacophony of musical sounds from around the world, played by an international collection of amateur virtuosos who would gather on the steps of seamen's lodgings and emigrant houses.
Did you meet the musician Felix Doran?
I knew him as a child.
When did you meet him and where?
When I was a child, he used to stay in the campsites with him around town, Manchester and all over. We used to pull in and pull out. He was my father's uncle.
What was he like?
He was a very nice old man, very kind. Everyone loved him. All the children would come running to him when he used to come in.
What can you tell us about him and his music?
He was a famous musician and one of the best.
Journalists and stuff often ask me about like what makes a Liverpool sound or why have so many bands come out of Liverpool, and I do think it's a really hard thing to pin down, but I just think there's a tradition and a heritage. So, you know, there's obviously people have seen lots of other people come out of Liverpool, and most people know somebody or other who's been in a band and sometimes had success, so that's part of it. I just think there's an inherent musicality in it. I think some of it's to do with the river and, you know, people coming in and the storytelling bit, that some of it comes from Liverpool, probably some of it comes from the other cultures that have come into Liverpool, you know, a real storytelling narrative thing, and sometimes that is just done in stories, sometimes it's done in music. I think part of it is down to that sort of party thing that's in Liverpool, which comes about from Liverpool being a port city, and you never know what's going to happen next. It's just people just want to enjoy themselves, and music's always a big part of that.
Now, Liverpool is a working-class city. People here live from pay packet to pay packet.
From weekend to weekend. So the life cycle through the years is broken down to a series of 7-day touches when the loot comes in, and they get a day and a half off, and they can go out and have a drink.
Money.
...1997, and I'm rocking in front of a giant speaker, oblivious to all except the bass line that pounds through my body. Cloaked in total darkness, there's no feeling like it, the heavy, heavy dub sound. Eyes may meet through the blue-grey haze, but a slight nod speaks volumes and is the only communication required. This is the front line, where they play only reggae. I come here a lot. My friends, they're mainly from Egbert, think it's dangerous, so mostly I come alone. There aren't many places you can comfortably do that as a woman, but there is nowhere I feel safer.
The music scene in Liverpool in the late 80s, early 90s was probably when from a selfish point of view, it's when I got lots of work. But it was one of those exciting periods which happens in Liverpool probably every decade or so, when there's a real upsurge in something. So in the late 80s and 90s, it was the explosion of dance music, house music in the UK, and it's like separate scenes in cities like Liverpool and Manchester. And that was really exciting I think for someone my age who'd been brought up in an era when nightclubs were horrible places. You'd only went, people went in there, and it was normally the source of drunken brawls because people just drank lager and fought, and you had to wear shirts and ties and trousers and proper shoes to get in, and the music was terrible, and there was horrible things like the slowies where lots of men just stood around the dance floor, and then at the end of the night there was a slowie, and then the theory was that you moved in on a girl that you fancied and asked her to do a slow dance with you, which was always just something I just hated. Me and my mates never really went to those clubs because they were horrible. So suddenly you had these clubs where you could go in with trainees, they were playing great music, and people were generally nice and happy and stuff. So that sort of cultural and social shift was amazing for me, as well as loving the music and also getting to write about it. So I think people who weren't around then and who hadn't experienced what went before that don't always get it. So it was, lots has been written about it now, but at the time, particularly for young lads, there was the whole culture of going to match, and there was like lots of fighting stuff and all that, and then suddenly people loved each other and were hugging each other, and it was just a massive change. And Liverpool was, it was a really important scene in Liverpool.
Liverpool was post-Beatles, and there was an air of change about it. There was an air of radicalism. Roger McGough, Adrian Henry, Brian Patton were still the poets. Harold was very involved in poetry. I was writing poetry. I was very involved. He and I were sort of a performance act, and we performed all over the place, not just in Liverpool, but right across the UK, frequently performing with Adrian and Roger, and not so much Brian Patton. He'd moved away by then. And it was all very exciting, and I sort of developed these ideas around art, that that art was not an elitist activity, not an ivory tower activity, but it had to connect with people, and people made their own art. And it was exactly those views that got me in touch with Arthur, because they were Arthur's views. He was a man of the people, as you know. He'd been come up through camel leads and knew how to weld, and he wasn't of the Henry Moore school, where Henry Moore would make his small sculpture perfect, and then a team of craftsmen, if you like, would then scale it up and digging against that. But Arthur was, very hands-on.
The remarkable conjuncture of radical activity in 1911 displayed how Liverpool differed from national norms. Reaching a peak in an unprecedented long, hot spell, the radical fervour extended from direct action political and industrial militancy, a syndicalist-led general strike that brought the city near to revolution, and so alarmed the government that Home Secretary Winston Churchill sent a warship to the Mersey, to cultural and creative endeavour drawing inspiration from the American and continental European avant-garde. The opening of the Liver building, the first major building in the UK to use reinforced concrete in its construction, transformed the pierhead in suitably un-English style, suggesting Chicago on the Mersey. This controversial modern edifice was crowned by 2 liver birds, which came to symbolise the city's resilience. Alongside artworks by Liverpool artists, the Sound and Studio Society mounted an exhibition of post-impressionist art at the Bluecoat, including works by Picasso, Matisse, Van Gogh, Cézanne and Gauguin, shocking conservative middle-class tastes. Defiantly non-provincial, Liverpool before the First World War was a radical and exciting second metropolis.
I had an uncle in the 1914 war. I used to look after mules. Now, he got 2 blankets to cover the mules up. They never got a blanket to cover the men up. Could have probably said it was easier to get a man from England and get a mule. And naturally he worked on the docks. He naturally became a rebel, a revolutionary in every way.
People were very politically minded. The adults, like at the time I was young, and what would be adults to me, because I could hear them talking about it in the kitchen. They used to have great debates, you know, about the social life and how poor their lives were. They were aware. They were aware. They were more aware than what people are today. You know, they could see what was happening, and they could see the beginnings of the war beginning. And the older men who remembered the First World War, they remembered what it was like and how they came back to nothing at all. They talked a great deal more than what people do now.
They still come back to men, and I mean to say, and what shall I say, unity. If you get one man on the docks thinks he's being wronged, and he suddenly decides, I'm being wronged, and until it gets justified, I'm not doing that, nobody else will go and do his job. So the solidarity, talk about Poland, they should have come here and took a few lessons in solidarity. I mean, it may not always be right, but then an injustice to one is an injustice to all. You may be asked to do that the next day.
Let's forget the usual image of the crucifixion, an auburn-haired, blue-eyed Christ with a nail in each corner. I personally don't believe that. What I believe in is here, a multiracial Christ who is all mankind.
On many occasions I thought about the welcome that I had here from Don May, because there were so many black people that had been turned away by other churches. You know, they were told that there was another church down the road. But the significance of that sculpture to me and Arthur Dooley's work is very important for the community and the wider world.
When 1981 happened, what people forget is they think that it happened, the Defence Committee sprung up, and then people took on responsibilities for guiding others in the direction of creating the Law Centre. Well, the thing was, 81 was basically a platform for what we'd already learned in the previous decade, because in our teens, we were inspired by the Huey P. Newtons, the Angela Davises, the Elaine Browns, the Eldridge Cleavers, the Bobby Seals, the George Jacksons, and all relative to what they were doing as Black Panthers. And it wasn't about the militancy, it was more about what they were doing in relation to their black community and taking responsibility for service in that community. But I think because of the history of Liverpool's black community and its settlement and its integration, that was a big advantage, because we weren't a sort of first generation settling in like Windrush. We weren't of that ilk. We were well ingrained within Liverpool's sort of culture, and second, third, fourth generations, no problem. And so that, I think that obviously links into as well the whole issue of integration in terms of mixed race as well, and the fact that the police were as racist then, if not even more, than what they were in 1981.
We lost our free speech area. Ironically, they arranged the free speech area at Seamen, you know, impossible to get at. It's not right on the waterfront there, it's still there, Speakers Corner it's called. And if you look around, if you walk on the prom from the Seamen ferry about a mile, there it is, the open space and Speakers Corner. Unusable because of wind, weather, rain, slashing and all that. No cover, no shelter that side at all.
Not many years ago, about 3 years ago, these were houses with families in. Real communities. These streets which separate the grass around here were full of people. full of families, and the whole lot's been destroyed, torn apart. I mean, when you tear streets down like this and move communities, you've destroyed that community. And this is going on all over the place. You know, you destroy the communities, you destroy the city. And we're in the middle of a great demolition job on the family. We're seeing the family and the communities being broken up.
My mum's parents were from Dublin, and my dad's parents were Scottish and Swedish. We lived on Scotland Road, and I was born in Tented in Mill Road Hospital. When I was 3, the family moved to Croxteth, which was a new estate at the time. And according to my mum, she thought she'd landed in a luxurious home. It was the middle of 3 flats, and it had a lovely bathroom and a lovely kitchen. So that for them was wonderful. In retrospect, she realised, and my dad realised, and we realised that it was basically a social experiment that had gone wrong. So from 1954, we lived in that flat.
My name is Rose. My father visited Liverpool's Dockland and would board ships arriving from any African port, returning home with all the ingredients he needed. The kitchen became a hub of creativity when he cooked, and the exotic smells were irresistible. We often had egusi and spinach soup with an array of aromatic seasoning and hot African pepper, accompanied by a plate of gari or ground rice. I loved being in his company, especially when he cooked and talked about his father, who came to England as a qualified sailor with the ambition to join the Royal Navy and help the Second World War effort.
Although there's a long-established black community here, that presence in Liverpool has really suffered a lot of discrimination. If you look at, like in 1980, there was about 45% of black people that weren't employed, you know, in terms of education, in terms of housing. And it's still very much, you know, a lot has been done in terms of changing the terminology and in terms of saying we're a diverse society, but yet there is still a lot of exclusion and there is still a lot of inequalities.
A radical practice in Liverpool. This book tells the story of Princes Park Health Centre in Liverpool 8. The practice, founded by Dr. Cyril Taylor, gained a reputation for innovation and preventive health care. Born in 1921 in the Wirral, returning to Liverpool after the war, Cyril took up a post as orthopaedic registrar at Walton Hospital. He was not reappointed, though, after 6 months, partly because he was a communist, and also because he was actively trying to get the nurses to join a trade union. In 1949, he was employed as a medical officer for the Liverpool Shipping Federation. When asked to leave, again because of his politics, he decided to work as a family doctor. There was no training for GPs at the time, sick patients queued up to be seen, and GPs improvised as best they could with advice and treatment. 2 weeks after starting work in a local surgery, Cyril was again fired for being a communist. This time, he took the opportunity to be his own boss, and he started up as a single-handed GP at No. 7 Sefton Drive, Liverpool 8, in 1950.
This is like, for me, you know, this compares with Venice. And we could have this Venice right here in the city.
And it's not only just this dock, you know, you can go right along. We could do something with the whole dock area, from the pier head right down to the dingle. Could be developed with new ideas. And if the people of Liverpool could have a say in it, and have investments in it, and we could own and control it, We could do something really dramatic here, but it needs imagination.
I'd been at the Pierhead that weekend and I was puzzled to see accounts in the press of gangs who were intimidating and harassing people, as the atmosphere I'd seen had been so positive. If you've not been there yourself recently, I can't recommend it enough. When lockdown restrictions eased, but businesses remained closed, groups started to tentatively trickle back to the plaza in front of the Three Graces to exercise and socialise. As the weather improved and students returned, it became a thriving and inclusive centre of activity. On any given day, you can see skateboarders, roller skaters, BMX bikes, e-scooters, fixie stunt cyclists, parkour, and even a game of keepy-uppy. There's the kids with their parents and the skaters even older than Tony Hawk. You'll see people dressed in fishnet with band t-shirts or hijabs with Converse. Some show off their incredible talents, such as the Ketwig, who was doing a wheelie in socks and sliders with the front wheel of his bike completely removed, and others are just taught basic skills by their friends. It's endlessly entertaining to sit and watch, but it's also heartwarming. The city centre has too long been a place where you had to spend money to enjoy. Now it's a place where you can just hang out and be yourself.
And if you had the chance to talk to the Methodist Centre here and some of the young people here, you would perhaps be surprised to see that what was happening then in the 80s is still ongoing.
Today, ships in the Mersey estuary sail past metal statues. Anthony Gormley's Another Place, a congregation of silent, naked, cloned figures spread out along the distant shore. It is a haunting presence at the maritime entrance to a city that once ruled the waves, just as its merchants waved the rules. Yet few passengers made this sea journey now. Over a century ago, however, immigrants and emigrants arriving or departing at Liverpool's landing stage witnessed something quite different, experiencing what Walter Dixon Scott described as a democratic promenade. The coming together of business and pleasure, a rich diversity of people, from the city's wealthy merchants to its casual poor, from Europeans heading to a new life across the seas, to sailors from around the globe dropping anchor on Merseyside, among them those taking or bringing with them radical voices that would resonate across a century.
I want to see the city revived. And it could happen.
The possibilities are here. The people are here. And the will to do it is here. I see Liverpool as the capital of the Atlantic, the great seaport that opens up the whole new world.